Few stories in South African criminal history have shocked the public as deeply as that of Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu. A serving police officer from Tembisa, sworn to protect the very citizens she victimized, Ndlovu orchestrated and committed multiple murders over several years, targeting those closest to her for personal financial gain. By the time she was arrested in 2018, at least 6 people were dead, and another survived an attempted plot. During her trial, the nation looked on in disbelief as details emerged of insurance fraud, contracts on relatives' lives, and a brazen plot to kill more family members. What follows is an in-depth look at how this seemingly ordinary constable became one of South Africa's most infamous serial killers, weaving together the available evidence, court proceedings, and lingering questions that continue to haunt the country. Little is publicly recorded about Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu's early years. She was born in South Africa, likely in the late 1970s or early 1980s, into circumstances that remain sparsely documented. As with many South African families living in or near the sprawling townships, financial opportunities could be limited and the environment challenging. Family ties. Sources suggest Ndlovu grew up in a modest household, though details on her parents or siblings are scarce. Education. Specifics of her formal education are unclear, but she presumably completed sufficient schooling to qualify for law enforcement entry-level requirements. The South African Police Service, APS, is a structured organization with rigorous training programs designed to filter out potential recruits incapable of meeting professional and ethical standards. By the mid-2000s, Ndlovu had successfully enlisted. Police college, she would have undergone standard police college training, discipline, firearm handling, and the basic principles of law enforcement. First postings. At some point, she was stationed at the Tembisa South Police Station, situated in Gauteng province, approximately 30 kilometers from Johannesburg's city center. Colleagues described her as somewhat quiet and unremarkable, not someone who immediately stood out for exemplary service or disciplinary issues. Yet behind this seemingly ordinary persona, dark ambitions began to manifest, ambitions that appeared bound to personal financial gain through criminal acts. South Africa has a robust funeral and life insurance culture. Many citizens, particularly in townships, invest in funeral cover to ensure that when a family member passes away, finances are available to cover costly burial rituals. These products, while immensely helpful in times of grief, can also be exploited. Fraudsters sometimes insure distant relatives or non-existent individuals to claim payouts illicitly. It is not inherently suspicious for a person to hold multiple funeral or life policies for relatives, especially in communities that frequently pool funds for funerals and rely on extended family structures. Insurance institutions sometimes fail to cross-check the authenticity or frequency of these policies, especially when beneficiaries have plausible relationships to the deceased. By approximately 2012, Ndlovu began acquiring life and funeral insurance policies, in which she was the primary or sole beneficiary. Some policies named her partner, siblings, nieces, nephews, or cousins as the insured parties. While holding such policies for close relatives is not automatically suspicious, the sheer number of them and the timing of their acquisitions would later raise serious red flags. Each policy on its own did not stand out. Ndlovu used her real name and legitimate family connections, and no immediate forensic inquiries were triggered. Observers suggest that Ndlovu was grappling with debt or a desire for a more affluent lifestyle than her police salary could afford. The exact nature of her spending habits remains speculative, but the alleged mismatch between her income and expenses forms part of the motive picture. The earliest suspicious death linked to Ndlovu was that of her boyfriend, who was found murdered under circumstances that at first seemed like a random act of violence, something tragically not uncommon in high-crime areas. But with hindsight, law enforcement realized a pattern. Timing. Ndlovu had taken out a policy on his life some months before his death. Payout. She collected a significant sum. Investigators later discovered no direct evidence of a break-in or robbery consistent with the alleged crime scene. Over the next several years, from 2012 to 2018, no fewer than 5 more people close to Ndlovu died violently or under mysterious circumstances. Sister, nephew, 2 nieces, a a cousin. In each instance, the cause of death varied. Some were stabbed, others shot, with the events often staged to appear as robberies or random township killings. Funeral arrangements were managed quickly, and Ndlovu invariably stepped forward to claim insurance benefits. Community shock. While family and friends grieved, many chalked these incidents up to the harsh realities of crime in Tembisa and surrounding regions. They had little reason to suspect that a loved one, Ndlovu, might be behind each tragedy. Insurance paydays. By some estimates, the cumulative payouts Ndlovu received hovered around R1.4 million, roughly USD 100,000 at various exchange rates, a substantial fortune in local purchasing power. One might wonder how multiple murders involving members of the same extended family did not set off alarm bells sooner. Several factors contributed. High crime rates. In township areas with elevated murder statistics, each death can be initially attributed to ambient crime or interpersonal conflict. Emotional ties. It is often beyond the pale of imagination to suspect a grieving sister or aunt of orchestrating the violence. Limited insurance scrutiny. Since no single claim was astronomical, insurance companies approved payouts without deep cross-referencing. The belief that multiple policies on different relatives were normal also lessened suspicion. Eventually, the repetitive pattern of one beneficiary, Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu, filing claims on deceased relatives could not go unnoticed. As Ndlovu's claims multiplied, it became increasingly apparent that all roads led back to her. Some companies initiated internal reviews. Questions arose. Why were so many of her immediate relatives dying in violent circumstances within a short time frame? While ironically she was a police officer, local detectives outside her direct professional circle began to connect the dots. Rumors circulated that something was off about the tragedies befalling Ndlovu's family. Colleagues reportedly whispered about how unlucky she was, or how she always seemed to have fresh insurance claims. Relatives or acquaintances may have quietly tipped off authorities, pointing out the improbability of so many close relatives dying in succession. A discrete task force was formed or integrated with existing teams investigating violent crime in Gauteng. They covertly reviewed case files of each victim, checking ballistic or forensic reports, and cross-matching the timing with insurance claims. By 2018, law enforcement and insurance fraud investigators suspected that Ndlovu might be planning additional murders. Fearing further loss of life, they orchestrated a sting. Ndlovu attempted to hire individuals to kill more relatives, possibly including another sister who had not yet been harmed. Investigators used informants or undercover officers to pose as potential accomplices, capturing damning conversations via audio or video. In the recorded exchanges, Ndlovu allegedly outlined how she wanted these next murders to be carried out, demonstrating her methodical approach. On the strength of these tapes and corroborating evidence, police moved in. Ndlovu was placed under arrest, facing charges of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and fraud. In 2021, after lengthy delays and investigative work, Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu appeared in the High Court, Gauteng Division. The state charged her with 6 counts of murder, multiple counts of attempted murder, defeating the ends of justice, fraud, tied to the insurance claims. The prosecution argued that Ndlovu systematically planned the murders to collect policy payouts, thus consolidating her finances at the expense of her own relatives' lives. Insurance documentation. Prosecutors presented reams of policy forms, beneficiary records, and receipts of payouts. Each document carried Ndlovu's name, revealing that she initiated or updated policies shortly before each victim's death. Cell phone and bank records. Detailed logs showed patterns of communication between Ndlovu and alleged hitmen or accomplices, including suspicious cash withdrawals or deposits around the times of the murders. Witness testimonies. Several key witnesses played a crucial role. At least one admitted to being approached by Ndlovu to carry out a killing, backing up the state's conspiracy narrative. Ndlovu's defense maintained her innocence, claiming lack of direct evidence. She insisted there was no videotape of her committing the murders. Circumstantial suggestions. The defense pointed out that while suspicious, life insurance claims alone do not prove murder. Alleged coercion. Defense counsel suggested that some witnesses might have been coerced by police or were seeking reduced charges in exchange for implicating Ndlovu. However, cross-examination revealed significant inconsistencies in Ndlovu's accounts of events, and the weight of documentary proof was immense. The trial drew considerable public attention, with journalists capturing every twist. Ndlovu's demeanor, she often appeared calm or defiant, at times smiling or joking with court staff, behavior that struck observers as incongruous with the severity of allegations. Family reactions. Surviving relatives, appalled by the betrayal, watched from the gallery. Some expressed anger, others heartbreak, as they saw the evidence unfold. A killer's MO, psychological insights. While no public forensic psychology profile was formally released, glimpses into Ndlovu's psyche emerged. Greed-driven. The simplest motive was financial gain. She exploited the trust of her own family members to enrich herself. Calculated planning. Repeated acts over several years indicate methodical behavior rather than impulsive homicide. She usually arranged the killings at moments she could plausibly claim benefits. Abuse of power. As a police officer, Ndlovu might have believed she was beyond suspicion or better able to manipulate investigators. Absence of remorse. Court spectators commented on her apparent lack of empathy, citing how she calmly recounted or denied the incidents. Criminologists posited that the repeated success of the murders, combined with the absence of early detection, may have emboldened Ndlovu. Each successful insurance payout likely fueled her sense of impunity, culminating in ever riskier attempts. In October 2021, the High Court delivered a scathing verdict. Ndlovu was found guilty of 6 murders. She was also convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, defeating the ends of justice, and multiple counts of fraud. The presiding judge condemned her actions as evil and an egregious abuse of familial trust, emphasizing the moral repugnance of killing one's own kin for monetary gain. Ndlovu received multiple life sentences, essentially ensuring that she would never walk free. South African sentencing guidelines reserve life imprisonment for especially heinous crimes. Serial murder for profit, in this case, squarely fit that criterion. Unlike some instances where mitigating factors such as extreme poverty or mental illness lead to reduced sentences, the court found no compelling justification for leniency. Observers noted that Ndlovu displayed little visible remorse at the verdict, fueling public anger and sorrow among the victim families. The revelations of a killer cop generated fierce discussions on talk shows, newspapers, and social media. Many questioned how thoroughly SAP screened and monitored its officers, and why it took so long for Ndlovu's pattern of deaths to spark formal inquiries. Some relatives expressed relief at the verdict, viewing it as overdue justice. Yet they also acknowledged that the trauma of losing multiple loved ones could never be fully repaired. The knowledge that a trusted figure in the family had orchestrated these killings deepened their grief. In the aftermath, South African insurers pledged to strengthen policy verification processes, cross-organization data sharing, and deeper investigations of suspicious claims. Critics called for clearer government regulations to prevent unscrupulous individuals from exploiting funeral and life policies. Every sensational case leaves its share of rumors and unresolved curiosities. In Ndlovu's case, lingering questions include exact financial motive. How deep in debt was she? Or did she simply crave a more lavish lifestyle? Investigations shed light on her gambling or excessive spending habits, but offered no definitive picture of her exact financial unraveling. Potential accomplices. Did she work alone in all killings? Or were there unindicted co-conspirators who helped stage crime scenes or provide inside information? Extent of additional plots. Prosecution evidence hinted that she had targeted a broader circle of relatives. Had the 2018 sting not succeeded, how many more might have died? While the trial covered the essential facts, it's possible that future revelations or further prosecutorial investigations could bring additional details to light. For many South Africans, the case of Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu exemplifies a deep betrayal of both personal and public trust. Police officers hold a position of respect, being tasked to shield communities from violence, not inflict it. The notion that someone in uniform could systematically orchestrate family murders underscores broader tensions around corruption, resource gaps, and accountability in the country's law enforcement apparatus. Cultural impact. Tabloid headlines labeling her the killer cop or insurance slayer tapped into national anxiety about violent crime. Many recognize that if a police officer could so brazenly manipulate systems, the lines between victim and perpetrator could blur unpredictably. Moral lessons. True crime enthusiasts and criminologists often caution that the extremes of human behavior sometimes sprout from mundane motivations like greed. In Lovu's story, the danger lay in how ordinary insurance policies and familial bonds were weaponized. A cautionary tale. The saga compels families, communities, and institutions alike to remain vigilant. While most individuals with insurance policies have benign intentions, the horrifying precedent set by Ndlovu reveals how cunning criminals can exploit standard practices. The story of Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu stands out as one of South Africa's most unsettling criminal cases in recent memory. Over several years, a quiet policewoman orchestrated murders within her own family, all to collect insurance paydays. Her eventual arrest and conviction in 2021 exposed systemic oversights in both law enforcement and insurance industries. It also ignited public debate about the capacity for evil in those entrusted with authority. Today, Ndlovu resides behind bars, serving multiple life sentences. For the families whose members she callously murdered, the legal resolution cannot fully restore the countless lives uprooted by her crimes. Yet justice, limited though it may be, has been served, ensuring no further tragedies can be orchestrated by her hand. As true crime narratives continue to unfold across the globe, the Rosemary Ndlovu case remains a sobering reminder that sometimes the darkest killers emerge from the very institutions we rely upon for safety.